Hi everyone and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host David Holloway and I'm pumped as always to be here with you. Paul Bindig, it's always a damn pleasure to have you here as well. How are you, sir?
The pleasure is all mine, David. I'm excited once again to be with you and I'm looking forward to our guest.
Yeah, look, we've just finished a lovely time with Felix Bornholdt. So some of you will have heard of Felix's work with Lime Cordiale, others won't. We're obviously of a vintage, Paul, that we're aware of Lime Cordiale thanks to extended family, i.e. the next generation.
Yes.
But as you mentioned in the show, this is a real deal band that does some amazing music, and I certainly am keen to go and see them. So we chat to Felix about quite the gamut of stuff, don't we, Paul?
Yeah, I have a little, very incidental, personal Lime Cordiale anecdote, which I'll tell in the outro. But they're a big deal. They're a big deal here in Australia, that's for sure. And we're very lucky to get hold of Felix, who's also a very busy guy. Yeah,
absolutely. They're about to embark on another big tour. So, I hope you enjoy this interview with Felix, and we'll see you after the show. Felix, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, sir. And for those of you outside of Australia, as you can see, we're suffering through a winter here, unlike all you lucky people sweltering in the heat of Europe and the US. But yeah, wonderful to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here. And yeah, it does get cold in Australia. Who would have thought?
It does. So I thought we'd kick off, Felix, just with a usual question about your musical upbringing. I know you're New Zealand born and bred. And I'm just really keen in those early years before you moved to Australia to study music. What were your formative years like from a musical viewpoint? What got you passionate about music?
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up in Wellington in New Zealand. And I mean, I owe a lot of it to my dad. My dad is a huge jazz and vinyl nut, and so is my uncle, actually. And we live just down the road. So I kind of grew up on this diet of like a lot of ECM, kind of like Art Ensemble of Chicago, Don Cherry, Pharoah Sanders, and kind of lots of pretty, I guess, my dad kind of, there's music playing constantly in the house. I mean, to the point where still when I go home now, I will get woken up at 7 a.m. in the morning because Greg, my dad, will have put on, like some pretty hard yakka, like Pharoah Sanders record, top volume, everyone's in bed. That's kind of what happens in the house. So I grew up on all that music, and that was just always there. And my uncle as well, they have this huge vinyl collection. I think, when they were putting together, there was a book on Mike Nock, the pianist, done a few years ago, and they had to come to my dad and my uncle because they had Mike Nock records that Mike Nock didn't have and no one had. So, they kind of have this amazing collection. So I grew up on all this really interesting music. And I should also say, my dad's a painter and a poet, and my mum is also a poet and a writer. So I sort of grew up in an environment where everyone I knew through the family everyone was writers or painters. And that was what my parents did. No one I knew had a normal job. So it almost seemed, I think, the big rebellious thing to do would have been to get a normal job. And it seemed very normal that, of course, you'd go and study jazz piano. And that was, I guess, just growing up on all that music. I've obviously played all through my childhood, and about halfway through high school was kind of thinking like, this makes sense. I want to do this with my life. And then surprisingly, my dad and my mum were both like, oh yeah, of course you've got to do a jazz piano degree. That's a no-brainer.
And so you preempted my next question beautifully, Felix, which was, why was it, aside from you were doomed from the beginning, it sounds like, in a positive way, as far as your exposure to jazz.
No
chance at all. But so what was the decision that from being immersed in that as a teenager to, okay, I'm actually going to do this full time and study it? What was the turning point for you?
I mean, there's probably some records, but we can save those for Desert Island Discs. I think of maybe also realizing, because New Zealand does feel very far away from the rest of the world, and possibly realizing I kind of discovered maybe halfway through high school this whole Australian jazz scene and musicians from New Zealand. And that was sort of very inspiring. I mean, there's great New Zealand and Australian musicians. and sort of realizing that that was a thing and that that was possible. And I mean, I moved over here to study at the conservatorium. I did the jazz course there, and sort of finding out about that was this amazing moment of realizing, oh, you can do this in this part of the world. And there's this amazing tradition of really incredible music coming out of the South Pacific. I think I'd always been very like New York centric in terms of where I thought it happened. And it was kind of amazing realizing, oh, there's these things happening quite close to home.
What would be something our listeners might not know that speaks to that, as far as the South Pacific tradition in this sort of music?
Yeah, I mean, even as a crossover, like, there's a Mike Nock album. Mike Nock, if you don't know, is just this amazing pianist. He's originally New Zealand, but he spent a really long time in America, was in bands with everyone, and now lives in Australia. But he made a record on ECM called Ondas. And, there's which is kind of, it's like a really famous seminal jazz record. And there's a track on that called Land of the Long White Cloud, which is a term for New Zealand. So there's kind of these things of, you see this New Zealand track on an ECM record by a New Zealand pianist. Yeah, so they help you connect the dots a little bit.
No, that's great. And so what's your recollections, Felix, of turning up to Sydney to actually study this? So obviously, as much as you were immersed into it and you would have developed a body of knowledge, what were the eye-openers in that more formalised study for you, both as a player and just as an appreciator of the genre?
I mean, I guess I had that very classic thing of, by the time I left Wellington, I'd really been doing it for quite I was practicing hours a day. I was doing a lot of transcribing, and you sort of get to a certain level where I was feeling like, oh, I'm kind of, maybe I'm the guy in my high school. And then obviously coming from New Zealand to Australia, where there's just a lot more people, and the con, and having that, just the classic moment of like, oh, I am right at the bottom here. There's a lot of work to be done. But I mean, I was totally enchanted when I first moved here. Wellington's a really amazing city, but it is small. I think there's 200,000 people, and so moving from there to Sydney, where I think there's 6 million people in Sydney, it did really feel like I just rocked up in New York, and I was living with this amazing trombone player, Matt O'Brien, who's a phenomenal musician. He's really great in Australia, but we were just going out to gigs like 6 nights a week in Sydney, kind of for the first like 2 years that I moved here, because it was just a really foreign thing to be like, oh, there's jazz on every night here, and you can go see it. And it was a lot of records I'd been listening to in high school, like the Catholics, and kind of in my head, these people were more famous and kind of meant more to me than, like if you ran into Taylor Swift or something, it was like, oh my God, the Catholics are doing a gig. We got to go. And it was just that very kind of enchanting period of getting here and practicing a ton and seeing all this music and realizing you're not good and you got to put in a lot of work.
So Felix, tell us about, so you're in Sydney, you're studying, as you say, you're out regularly checking out jazz gigs. How did this morph for you into starting to gig regularly yourself? What did this look like? What were you doing at the time?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of an interesting path. So, I mean, I didn't really play gigs for the first couple of years in Sydney, apart from very occasionally, because I was sort of really, I guess, very self-conscious or slightly paranoid about, I'd become aware that maybe I was not quite as good as being the only guy in Wellington would lead me to believe. And I think I really felt not in a rush to suddenly start performing publicly. But I started, I guess, through the con, I was really into, and I'm still really into, like improvised music and creative music. And I guess, like, that's weird to call it creative music, experimental music. So I was, for quite a few years, I was doing a lot of gigs where I was playing prepared piano, like putting nails and bits of sticky tape inside the piano and kind of turning it into percussion instruments. And I was doing quite atonal and avant-garde performances, and playing kind of long form, durational, strange improvised things on prepared piano. And as well as some more traditional jazz, the kind of bread and butter jazz gigs that you do. And like, I still really love playing standards. And then I guess moving forward slightly, it was a weird sort of side-by-side thing, because I was in my last year at the con and I was doing a thesis on Messiaen, the French composer, and looking at, so nerdy. We can nerd out. I was looking at one of, he has like these modes of limited transposition, these kind of interesting scales that he invented or discovered. And I was doing a thesis on using one of those and ways that you could build an improvising language around that. And then at the same time, I also started playing in Lime Cordiale. So I had these two concurrent streams that were quite different from each other.
All right, so let's talk about Lime Cordiale. Now, our Australian listeners and viewers will be very familiar with Lime Cordiale, but it's possible that some of our overseas listeners and viewers may not. So here's my description of Lime Cordiale, but I'm much more interested in yours, Felix. So Lime Cordiale, contrary to popular belief of people my age and David's age and older, where we all go modern music, it's all just someone in their bedroom pushing buttons and there's no actual musicianship behind it, and it's boring and there's no modulation, and it's Lime Cordiale very much gives the lie to that idea. Lime Cordiale are a real band that play real music live, and they are phenomenally popular with young people. And I was telling Felix a story off air before that my two sons are signed up, committed, rabid Lime Cordiale fans, and so is David's daughter. So our adult children love Lime Cordiale. So I'm much more interested in your perspective on Lime Cordiale. So how did that start happening? So on one hand, you're playing these avant-garde gigs with nails on piano strings. How do we end up playing in a phenomenally popular current band that is scaling great heights? But also I'm interested in your perspective on the music and how you perceive Lime Cordiale and what attracted you to it.
I guess that, the connection's kind of actually a Sydney Conservatorium one, because, I was good friends and studied there with Nick Polavigno, who's a trumpet player and guitarist, really phenomenal. And he was already playing in the band in Lime. So we were at uni together. I was head deep in the thesis. And then, Nick gave me a call one day and said, I need a keyboard player in this band. Are you kind of interested? And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm pretty deep in the Messiaen at the moment, but we'll do this. We'll give it a go. Obviously checking the music out, like where the music was at that stage. It was I think things that appealed to me about it, it was a very instrument heavy band, or there's a real, everyone can really play, and there's a real attention to parts and detail. Also, Nick and I were both at the con, and then James, who plays drums, also went through the jazz course at the con, and Ollie, who's a lead singer and or one of the lead singers and kind of runs the project, did classical clarinet at the con. So there's four of the five were through the conservatorium. So I think maybe there's a little bit of an outlet there for everyone still wanting to really be on the instrument. So you don't just want to, I think there can be a tendency with pop acts, you throw everything on the track and on backing track and call it a day. And there's a real aversion to doing that, which is great, and with the Lime thing.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, and I'm really curious as to what's the touring rig look like for Lime Cordiale. So what are you taking with you when you're playing these shows, and how are you using it?
Yeah, I mean it's not too complicated. It's almost fairly unsexy, but it's really good. I have a Yamaha CP73 as the main sort of keyboard for the Rhodes piano organ sounds. I just feel like for key beds, that's kind of the best feeling thing I've played. Stage pianos are such a tricky one. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about them. I haven't found one that does everything that you want it to do.
I think that's probably I think that would be a common experience, Felix. I use a Korg SV188, which I love, but it has.
I also had one of those.
you go. It has got its limitations, but it is fantastic for your roads and your whirlies and that sort of thing, as you would know, Felix. But then when I'm touring around, I tend to end up getting Roland versions of Rolands, which aren't bad either, but they have their limitations too. But sounds like the Yamaha's the one that does the most things for you the right way.
Yeah, it's good, and it's kind of, I guess, it's structured in a way where I do just keep that for pianos and Rhodes kind of tones. I have actually had I've sort of pitched it to people on Instagram, or Native Instruments on Instagram. But I do think it would be great just to have a stage keyboard that was really well weighted, that you could run Kontakt libraries on.
Agreed.
Which people are sort of, I think, possibly a reason they won't do that is because it would probably remove a lot of market need to ever upgrade it. And that's probably not in keyboard manufacturers' best interests. Because that just seems, and I have looked at certain points about getting really stuck in and building like a custom keyboard with like a NUC or like a mini computer or 2 Mac Minis in it to do that, but it sort of gets a little complicated and potentially less stable. But that's kind of always been the dream, is something that you can run Kontakt libraries on that's all in the one box, so you're not having like tons of laptops side of stage.
So I was going to say the Arturia Astrolab is sort of Arturia's attempt at that, and it's a nice first step. But I couldn't agree more. So sorry, keep going, Felix.
I was very excited about the Astrolab, and that's a bit of it. That's the closest that's ever been. So that was, maybe other companies will have to kind of have an answer to that now. But so I have that, and then I also have a UDO Super 6, which I'm so pleased. I see it everywhere now.
It's so loved, yeah.
It's great. I bought it in Bristol. I went to the factory where they make that synth. I mean, I say factory, it's 3 guys in like a little office in Bristol. And George Hearn, who designed and built the synth, was there, and they just work there full time. They're all built by hand. So I spent a morning there in Bristol a couple of years ago where they were showing me, they had a bunch of them in various stages of assembly, and I mean that's just an amazing synth. And I think I do think we're kind of coming out of it at the moment, but there was a real era of just vintage synth revival. And the UDO or the Super 6 is like a really new instrument, I think. It doesn't feel, I guess there's elements of it that are kind of like a Juno, but it's pretty like its own thing, and just, great just having a tiny company. And it's really amazing when you see them, like how much detail goes into every single unit. Like they're totally hand built. It's an amazing sounding synth.
Yeah, you're not helping me, Felix. I've been tempted to buy one of them a few times. You're making me want to again.
Pull the trigger on it.
Yes.
Actually,
Just get it, David.
I'd go the Super Gemini, that new one they just released.
That's right.
That's kind of the one. I mean, that's almost that's a pretty big thing to tour.
Yeah.
But for props to the Udo, I've really hammered that thing on the road, probably doing 100 shows a year with it for a few years, and it's never busted once. I've never had to take it apart, never had any problems with it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you've raised a really interesting point there, Felix. So touring, and Lime Cordiale have been a big touring band. I know you've got a huge number, relatively, of European and then back in Australian dates latter half of the year. Tell us about your initial experiences and what you've learned as a travelling, touring musician. We all know it's a hard grind, but just give us your perspective on how hard a grind that's been and what also some of the positives have been of that.
Yeah. I mean, like I've always been someone, I really love being on the road. And I guess there's been different phases, possibly something that is really different in Australia compared to like the US or the UK that people maybe don't realize until they come out here and have to do one, is that you have to fly everywhere in Australia. And especially when you've got back-to-back shows, you basically don't really sleep at all, kind of over a tour, and you're having to fly all your gear. So I mean, always on tour, it's with the Lime thing, we've been flying around like 600 kilos of gear that just gets checked in the same way you'd check in a suitcase. And that was how we did it for years and years. And I think I've never done any touring harder than touring in Australia. I really do feel like a weekend of shows in Australia is much harder than 6 weeks of shows in the States or in the UK when you're on a tour bus. And then, I guess in the last few years being on buses, that's been just fantastic, and then a whole other thing to learn of how do you live with these 12 people constantly, where you can, you're in bunks and you can reach out and touch everyone. You're that close.
Yes, no, it's a really good point. And as you know, there are levels. So it sounds like you had a few years of the van level and now you're at the bus level. And, you never know. Hopefully you're at the plane level, even in the US and Europe eventually.
Yeah, or back to the van.
Or back to the van, yes. That's right, your own van.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And we will be linking to, as I said, Lime Cordiale doing some extensive touring still the remainder of this year. Appreciate that perspective. And from one extreme to the other, as far as a busy touring life, to your own solo work and your solo piano record, tell us a little bit about that and what itch that scratches for you.
Yeah, I mean, that was, a lot of the music I grew up on, all that ECM stuff, I've really grew up on a lot of solo piano, and I felt like a real affinity to that, or closeness to that as a genre is not the right word, I guess a mode of writing or a mode of working. And I've really wanted to, I guess I've always really wanted to make a solo piano record, and I will make more. It's not one down. That's it. The record I put out last year, Man Overboard, was sort of a combination of, I guess about half the record is completely improvised, and there's a couple of things on it that are through composed, and then there are a few things on it that were, I guess, little cells or ideas. I mean, because I grew up as such an improvising musician, that's something that's really important to me. And I guess going into that recording date, I was trying to just prepare material that could have an openness to improvising without trying to delineate things too much. I think at least for me, if things are too codified, it's easy to get neurotic in your head if they're not working, and then really trying to make them work, as opposed to being open to just changing things on the day. So it's almost like a bunch of the material for that record was half prepared with the idea of, it would fully form itself on the day. I think it's also a really piano specific thing, because I was preparing a lot of that material on this beautiful old upright that I have at home, which had this gorgeous warm, that really close upright sound. But I knew I was going to record the record on a Steinway Model D, 12-foot concert grand in a concert hall. And, it's technically the same instrument, but you're pretty far apart from the piano, the upright in your living room to that. And I think you can make things work really well in your living room, and they're not going to translate at all onto the piano in the concert hall, and vice versa. This is one of the total banes and joys of playing the piano, is that you're never playing the same instrument. And that, the just piano to piano, the touch is so different. The way it responds is so different. The tone is different. There's that great Paul Bley quote about, I think he says something about each piano has, 1 or 2 good notes or 5 good notes, and you've got to find them each time. And I really feel that. And it's such a great challenge, and also a huge pain, because you can prepare things so well on one piano and then find that they're just not working at all on another one. For that record, it was taking care not to overwrite on the piano in my living room, knowing it was going to be happening on the Steinway in a concert hall.
Yeah, and waiting to see what that instrument would reveal to you about itself, which I guess informs your process, right?
Yeah, and I do really feel there is whenever I play those instruments, which is not hugely often because don't have a concert Steinway at my house. But it really does feel like kind of lifting a veil on what you can do on the piano. Like I love how those instruments really make you play at your best, or that they pull you up and you realize things are possible on them that you might not have thought you could do. And it's sort of hard because you're so dedicated to this instrument, but you only get those moments on the instrument kind of infrequently.
Yeah,
I'm very jealous of saxophonists that get to own their like Selma Mark VI, and that's just theirs, and they pick it up every day, and it's always the same.
Yeah, they cuddle it when they go to bed at night, no doubt. Yeah. Exactly right. So this is interesting. So you've mentioned there that this is not going to be your one and done piano solo record. You're looking forward to making more in the future. Tell us about your other future aspirations musically. I mean, from my perspective, you've got a long, successful career ahead of you. Your career has already been successful. What aspirations do you have? Are there people you'd like to work with? Are there other projects you'd like to explore?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, there's so much. I mean, at the moment, I'm working on a pipe organ and tenor sax duet record with an amazing Sydney saxophonist, Alex Jaspriza. So we're kind of getting music ready for that, which I'm really excited about. Actually, I guess just as a quick aside, this is possibly a good tip for piano players. If you don't have a piano at home, it's good to see what churches are around your area. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but a lot of churches have quite nice pianos in them, and they're normally pretty welcoming to people coming and practicing on them, which is what I did. There's a church just around the corner. And actually, the piano in it wasn't that great, but they have this fantastic pipe organ. So I started playing the pipe organ a lot. And that's kind of led to doing this duet record with Alex, the tenor sax player. But I'm working on that project. I also have another band we're kind of starting to book in properly, called Bike Thief, which is a trio with I think Alex Inman on drums and Jacques Emery playing prepared double bass. So Jacques like a total virtuoso, but he lies the bass flat. And then he's also a phenomenal drummer. So he's sort of drumming on the strings of the double bass with preparations in it. And then I'm playing lots of sub bass and kind of vocal sound. That's a very like dance music oriented project. There's a couple of things on YouTube. That's a hard one to explain. If you want to check it out,
we'll link to it. Yeah,
you can chuck Bike Thief into YouTube. And then, I'd love to, I'm looking at booking in some solo piano dates. I'd love to do a proper tour, and I'll probably try to do another solo record realistically next year, looking at the schedule. And I'm also starting to work a lot more on like film and TV composing, which I really love. I love composing to picture. And that's such a that feels very new and fresh for me. And such like a very inspirational way of working, having that much feedback on what's informing what you're writing. It's also really, it's quite foreign for me. I've been touring for kind of the last 7 years. It's amazing to work on music at home.
Yes.
Where you can have a coffee and then get into your own bed at the end of the day. That's kind of a novelty, which I'm loving.
Yeah, no, great stuff. You definitely need to value that while it's happening. So, and so, Felix, I have to ask, and it can be in any of the outfits, doesn't have to be Lime Cordiale, but can be a train wreck where something's gone spectacularly wrong for you, and you can laugh about it now, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm a big gig anxiety dream person. So I have recurring dreams where I walk on stage and all the rig just collapses. That's never happened. I can give you a Lime Cordiale train wreck where we had a gig a couple of years ago at the Hordern Pavilion, which is a really big venue in Sydney.
Yes,
There's about 5,000 people there. And we're on the last song of the set. It's kind of like that's a song called Robbery. It's probably the band's biggest song. As we're cruising to the last chorus, huge moment, biggest show we've ever done in Sydney, about to hit the last chorus, and the entire PA dies. And not like a blip, it just goes down. And, when you're wearing in-ears, sometimes it takes a minute to figure out what's happening. So it took us about 10 seconds to realize what was happening. Then everyone, obviously you're talking to the crowd on the microphone and it's not it's off, but you're not realizing, and you realize like, oh God, there's no way of communicating what's happened. And we had to go off stage and it took about 5 minutes to fire the PA back up.
Yeah,
and
wow.
Came on and did the last chorus and then went off. And it was kind of good. It felt sort of rock and roll, but you don't want that happening.
I guess it's a memorable moment if you're in the audience. You can say, I was there the day that Lime Cordiale played and they had to redo their last song because the PA just stopped working.
And actually, I think my daughter was there and I remember her telling me about that now. It's funny you say that.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, it stays with people.
Now, Felix, we ask all our guests this question, and that is to tag another keyboard player. And the reason we do that is maybe there's someone that you think would be an awesome guest for this podcast or someone that you would like to learn more about themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I would go Novak Manojlovic, if you haven't heard of him already. He is a phenomenal keyboard player.
So, sorry, the reason I'm laughing, Felix, is because my niece is married to Novak's brother, so I know Novak, and it's a great pick. I like your pick.
Hey, I mean, you already know him. If anyone doesn't, for listeners who do not know Novak is one of my favorite pianists, probably realistically in the world. He's a couple of years older than me. He's also from Sydney. He was a few years ahead of me when we were studying at the conservatorium. Just a really amazing singular voice. He writes beautiful music. He's an amazing improviser. He has a lot of really interesting projects, kind of string quartet things. He recently wrote something for the Sydney Symphony, which I saw at the Opera House with Godtet. Novak's got an amazing trio called Hecker, which I reckon that's like one of the best piano trios around at the moment in the world. Is really amazing music. And Novak's a great thinker and talker about music.
There you go.
That's my pick.
Great pick, and thank you. And I'm embarrassed to say I hadn't thought of approaching Novak, and I will be now. So,
I'll tell you what, David, if you're not able to get him on the show, that will reflect very badly on your inter-family relationship.
Yeah, it does. Pressure's on.
No, thank you, Felix. That's great. And now we have the dreaded Desert Island Discs question. So 5 albums. If you could only choose 5, what would they be?
Yeah, I don't know if this is dreaded. I quite like doing things like this. I wrote these down because I don't want to muck them up. In no particular order, Mutable Set by Blake Mills, who's a fantastic guitarist in LA. I mean, I had to put this on because probably for the last 2 or 3 years, I listened to this record every single morning. And I don't seem to get sick of it. And it's beautiful, it's so beautifully detailed. It's one of those ones that really, it opens up the more you listen to it. And it's just so beautifully paced. Like the first song, there's 2.5 minutes of sort of just very understated guitar things before, and then some vocals come in. You're like, oh, whoa, I didn't even know this was I feel we're so in the age of you got to have vocals in the first 2 seconds, otherwise the Spotify algorithm won't pick it up. So it's so refreshing to have this thing that just takes its time. So that's my number 1. My number 2, Colin Concert, Keith Jarrett.
Yeah.
I feel like, this is like it's an obvious pick, but I was trying to be honest with this, and like that was a huge one for me in high school. Like hearing that, it really, as with so many people, it completely blew my mind, and I was so moved by it, and I'm still so moved by it. Actually, as an aside, I watched that Keith Jarrett, Rick Beato interview. Oh,
it's amazing, yeah.
A few months ago, and God, it was amazing. But yeah, it just killed me. I was like completely bawling my eyes out because Keith has meant like so much to me as a musician. So that's my number 2. Number 3 would go The Mysterious Production of Eggs by Andrew Bird. Great title.
Yeah, it is a great title.
Yeah, just that it's such a beautifully, intricately arranged kind of Baroque chamber pop folk thing, and really singular record, I think. And I love like Andrew Bird particularly lyrically is so intelligent. Like I don't know anyone else that writes lyrics like Andrew Bird. Yeah, that's a very refreshing record for me. And also that was a teenage record where we had that in the house. It was actually one of the few non-jazz records we played in the house growing up. But that was on a lot. Andrew Bird, a record called Tribalistas by a band called Tribalistas, which they're kind of a Brazilian pop supergroup made up of Marissa Monte, Arnaldo Altunes, and Carlinhos Brown, who are these three huge Brazilian stars. And they put out this self-titled record in 2005, and it's just phenomenal. And again, it's a childhood record for me, but it's really joyous music and like such a great example of, the band is sort of greater than the sum of its parts kind of thing. Like those three all kind of have huge careers in Brazil, but there's something about this record that's really, it transcends what they can all do individually. And great songwriting and great instrumentation. There's a really good concert DVD, like a studio DVD of them putting that record together that we used to watch a lot when I was a kid over dinner. We'd put on the Tribalistas DVD. That was a big record for me. And last one, again, obvious choice. I'm trying to be honest. I've been listening to Kind of Blue a lot recently. Yeah. That's just an amazing record. And, like hearing it's such huge personalities on it, and they're so distinguishable, and it works so beautifully in a way that it almost, you sort of can't believe it, having a Miles solo and then a John Coltrane solo and then a Cannonball Adderley solo, and they're so completely who they are at that point. And it's this phenomenal thing. I've actually also been listening a lot to have you guys heard Blue, that album by Mostly Other People Do the Killing? It's a
no.
It's a note for note recreation of Kind of Blue, played by some really phenomenal New York jazz musicians. Like Peter Evans is on trumpet, and note for note isn't like every note of every solo, every drum hit, every bass note is identical, and it's kind of this weird art object, and it's like great to listen to.
Tribute band.
Sort of. I mean, it's like I almost reckon listening to it, it's sort of like there's things about it that are really funny, and it sounds so close to Kind of Blue, like where you probably wouldn't know if you walked into a shop and heard it, you'd go, it's Kind of Blue. And even maybe you'd really have to sit down and pay attention to it to notice the difference. But there's this wild uncanniness of it, and it's sort of very funny, and it changes the whole way you listen to that record. Listening to Kind of Blue is this amazing there's a great sense of freedom and relaxation to it. And then you're listening to Blue, you're aware of this like Herculean effort and this ridiculous detail. Peter Evans is really, every like kind of imperfection in notes that Miles plays, every like slightly broken note or when Miles doesn't quite make it, Peter's really nailed that so perfectly. So you're listening to the same music and it sounds 98% the same, but there's it completely recontextualizes what you're listeing to.
That's so interesting. We'll definitely have to check that one out.
Yeah, that's great.
It's worth checking out as a novelty. But Kind of Blue, fantastic record.
Yeah, and the classic. You said you're being honest, but the classic records are classic for a reason, right? So thank you for adding them to your list. So we always finish off with our quick fire 10, Felix, which is 10 quick questions, 10 quick answers. First thought that comes into your mind as we go along, and I'll kick us off. And this will be an interesting one. What's the first album you ever heard?
I think it was probably Fold Your Hands, Child, You Walk Like a Peasant by Belle and Sebastian.
Wow.
And I only know this because I had a memory of, there's a song from it that I remembered later in my life as sort of the first song I'd ever heard. And I didn't find out what it was until I was, in my 20s. But it was from that record.
Yeah, Belle and Sebastian are great. Most important pre-gig ritual?
Look, I'm a big snacker, snacks, meal. The meal's got to happen. can't be doing a gig hungry.
Amen, brother. Amen. All right, now your childhood story was so interesting because, as you outlined, unlike probably many people who get into professional music, you were fully supported. It was almost expected of you that that's what you would be doing. So which really throws this question into great context. If you hadn't been a musician, what do you think you would be doing?
I would probably be writing. I read a lot, and I grew up in a very literary family, and that's something that's really important to me. So,
yeah.
Though it did say in my yearbook I would be in the Navy.
Yeah.
Which I don't know where that came from. I wouldn't be in the Navy.
Probably the village people.
There was a point where that seemed on the cards for some reason. I'd be writing.
There you go. No, excellent. Now, assuming that someone from the conservatorium is listening, I think you have a vested interest in how you answer this, but transpose button or adjust on the fly?
You got to manually transpose it.
Have you ever used the transpose button? Just a supplementary to David's. Have you ever touched it?
No. I've played things really badly in a key I didn't quite get around a lot, but I've never hit the transpose button.
Awesome. I'm stealing that. I've done that a lot, regularly. Yeah. What's the favourite gig you've ever done?
A few months ago, I played a show at Wayward's in Sydney with Bike Thief, that trio with the prepared double bass and drums. Something about it, I mean, that music for me, it's you got to be so on and so aware and hanging by the seat of your pants. And it was just, a little hot, sweaty club gig. But yeah, I came away from that. I couldn't sleep. I was up all night. I was so charged up from it. That was probably, that's the one for me.
And favourite city you've ever played, Felix?
I love New York. It's almost too expensive to go there now, but I really love New York, and that feels like when you're playing a gig in New York, it does feel like a pretty important life moment.
Have you noticed, David, how no one ever says Adelaide?
That's right.
I thought it might be a chance.
Oh, sorry, I meant Adelaide, yeah.
Now you're lying. Okay, the favourite song you've played at a gig in this last year or so? Favourite song you've played?
Can I pick one of my own? Because it was the first time I played it live. Yeah, I did a solo piano gig, which is the first time I'd done one for quite a few years at the start of this year. And I played a song that's on my record, Man Overboard, called Rosie's Glorious Return to the Pool. And it was the first thing I kind of put together for the record, and it was the first thing I ever released under my own name. And it was just a really great feeling I think when you've seen something through from zero to full conception, it was just a fantastic feeling to do that.
Favourite music documentary or movie, Felix, if you can pick one out? Might be the Tribalistas DVD.
Oh, I got this. Tribalistas DVD, fantastic. Stop Making Sense, fantastic. Spinal Tap, fantastic. Actually, I watched a really good, I can't remember the name of it. There was a really good new doco on the Velvet Underground.
Oh, I know the one you mean, yeah.
Apple TV. The names just suddenly escaped me. I thought that was really good. Yeah. So there's 4.
What's one thing you would love to see invented that would make your life as a keyboard player, pianist, organist easier, maybe apart from your great stage piano idea?
Let me think. Damn, I spend a lot of time obsessing over that stage piano idea. I think the melding of computers into synthesizers or into stage keyboards hasn't really happened in a way that makes sense yet. And I would love to see something that lets you kind of have the same control as running Ableton in terms of sampling and soft synths.
Yeah.
That was built into a keyboard in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. No, great pick. And very last one, Felix, what keeps you sane outside of music? What's a non-musical activity or hobby that you like doing?
I'm a big reader. I read a lot, like on tour and at home. So, that's a huge one for me.
Great.
Give us a book recommendation.
Oh, what am I reading at the moment? Reading a great book at the moment called Priest Daddy by Patricia Lockwood. She grew up in a house where her father was a Catholic priest, which is very unusual, and a complete bizarre character. It's a really, really funny memoir. That's fantastic. I've also been reading the novels by Ben Lerner, great American writer and poet. He's written 3 novels. Also in Sydney, whenever I tell people that, there's a great saxophonist here, also from New Zealand, called Ben Lerner. And so I always say, I've been reading Ben Lerner's novels. Everyone goes, I don't know Ben wrote novels. Like, nah.
That's funny. Felix, we cannot thank you enough for taking time. That's been an absolutely brilliant chat. We're thrilled to see what happens with you in the future, and I'm certainly hoping to get along to some gigs, particularly if you're doing, as you said, more solo piano gigs and stuff in the future. Would love to get along and see you. But yeah, again, can't thank you enough for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
And there we have it. So I've been waiting, Paul. What's your Lime Cordiale anecdote? I want to hear it.
Well, it's not something I really wanted to mention during the interview because it's such a funny, silly little story. But there's a large venue in Adelaide called Theberton Theatre, which holds about, when I say large, it holds about 1,800 people. So it's for the town of Adelaide, it's a significant sized venue. And my tribute band has played there a few times. And on one of our recent visits to Theberton Theatre, we thought we'd sold out pretty well, and we found out we were following Lime Cordiale. They were playing the 2 nights before us at Theberton Theatre, and my kids went to that show, opposed to going to my show. They went to that show, and it sold out both nights. And I said, and I didn't know this. I said, were there many? They said they played 2 shows. Were there many people there? Dad, it sold out both nights in an hour or something within going on sale. So they're very popular and becoming more and more popular overseas too now, and rightly so. And please, listeners and viewers, for those who haven't heard Lime Cordiale, just check it out. It's great music, and you can see why it's popular. So it's nice to see this sort of music, which is really serious stuff, attracting so much popularity from young people. Makes me happy.
Yeah, and as you mentioned during the interview, like there is that stereotype of people of our generation and older thinking there is no good music out there. Now, it's obviously utterly rubbish. It is harder to discover because of the huge volume of music and streaming, but if you go looking for it, there's lots of great music there.
There's great stuff out there, yeah.
And Felix's own solo work and Lime Cordiales are 2 examples of that. So, yeah, no, great stuff. So thank you all for listening. We do love to hear from you. On editor@keyboardchronicles.com or on all the social media platforms under the Keyboard Chronicles. Big shout out to our gold and silver supporters. Dewi Evans from the lovely Wales in the UK is a valued new supporter. Thank you, sir. We've also got Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew, who's a long-term supporter. Thank you, as always, Tammy. Dave and the team from the musicplayer.com forums. We would be lost without you. Oh, there you go. Wearing the Keyboard Corner t-shirt. Good man. Yes, that's the place to go if you want to chat with like-minded individuals. And then Mike and the team at midnightmastering.com if you need high-quality mixing and mastering of your own works. Mike is the guy. So again, thank you for listening, and thank you, Paul, and we'll see you next show.